Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everyone. I will now call the University Senate to order. It's a pleasure to see everybody today. Item 2, apparently that was item 1. So is calling the Senate to order. Item 2 concerns administrative responses to the University Senate actions and is presented for information. Item 3 is a list of faculty, staff, and student deaths that have been sent for announcement to the Senate. I invite you to observe a moment of silence while I read the names. Rick Cotenbitel, Michael Leach, Alan Pearson, David Holzen, and students Abigail Badeau and Slaveg Solveig Rovic, excuse me. Thank you for that moment of silence for them. Item 4 is an approval of minutes from the University Senate meeting on September 26th. Amber, please initiate the poll.
Couple more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 128 ayes and 0 nays, that motion carries.
Thank you. Item 5 is my president's report. I'd like to start by addressing Monday's events in Morrill Hall. As I mentioned in my email this week to students, faculty, and staff, I'm very proud of our university's rich history and commitment to free expression. Respectful disagreements and debates are welcome across our 5 campuses, and demonstrations are supported if they are nonviolent and are consistent with university policies, as well as federal, state, and local laws. In fact, we've seen many peaceful protests already this semester, both before Monday and even after that this week, without incident. However, what happened in Morrill Hall on Monday was different. The situation involved intimidating employees in their workplaces, hampering their ability to move about freely, and destruction of university property. I had many very frightened staff on Monday. This is clearly absolutely unacceptable behavior within our university community. And to be clear, this was not a peaceful protest and not a First Amendment protected activity. These activities clearly cross the line into illegal activity. A number of the staff were working in Morrill Hall when masked individuals, some dressed in tactical gear, forced entry into locked offices by breaking interior windows. I would ask people to think about, as you sit in your offices, how that would feel for you right now if that occurred in your workplace. Protesters spray painted while staff was present, the building and equipment inside, and barricaded entry and exit doors. To ensure the safety of our employees who were working within Morrill Hall at the time, and in light of the clear vandalism and other property damage, the U of M Police Department was called to address the scene and situation and restore safety. Provost Kosten, during this time, as I committed to do during the time this summer when I laid out our approach to protests and to free expression on campus, we committed then to try to be as consultative as possible, when we can in a practical manner during real-time situations. And she engaged our colleagues from the FCC very early on in the process to try to get some input and ensure they were aware of the situation and could ask some questions. Their important input, I think, helped us to guide some of the ways that are that I can't discuss, but that we managed the best we could that situation. So I want to thank them for that. 8 of the individuals who were arrested on Monday are students currently enrolled in our Twin Cities campus. When police entered the building, they encountered a group of individuals on the building's ground floor. Individuals were initially placed in flex cuffs as officers worked to secure the space and assist other officers nearby who were requesting assistance. One of the individuals wore a vest marked press. The minute that was a Minnesota Daily reporter, was detained in flex cuffs for roughly 5 minutes. Once the area was secured, officers identified the individuals and were able to confirm, identified all the individuals and were able to confirm the Daily reporter's identity. And even though he was not carrying press credentials at the time, they released him out of respect for the press. I'll also note there was other press present at the time that were more clearly marked, and they were not detained in the same manner. And I want to reiterate, obviously, my and UMPD's care and interest and support of the press. After several attempts in Morrill Hall to locate the Daily reporter's belongings, which were not with him at the time, they were eventually found unattended on a different floor of the building among other backpacks and belongings, and he was told he could claim them at a later time at Public Safety. Yesterday, UMPD made contact with the reporter and he claimed his belongings. As I mentioned, other members of the media who were also present in Morrill Hall at the same time did not have a similar experience. In chaotic circumstances with so many unknowns, such as those experienced by officers in Morrill Hall on Monday, I'm told that officers must sometimes temporarily detain those they encounter to ensure everyone's safety before they're able to fully identify those people involved. In a statement published by the Department of Public Safety yesterday, which is public, they reinforced their respect for the role of the press, the importance of a free press in keeping the university and greater communities safe. And I want to reiterate that we're all committed to ensuring our journalists are able to safely and freely carry out their responsibilities in being the eyes and the ears of the public, and we'll continue that commitment to be the forefront of our work. I'll also note during that time that many staff in the building who were unable to also access their things often for a full day, including things that were important to them for the evening, such as their car keys, house keys, and phones. This was inconvenient to many people. While the university oversees our student policies and related academic sanctions, criminal charging decisions for the 11 individuals who are arrested will be made by the Hennepin County Prosecutor's Office. UMPD is gathering investigative details to inform Hennepin County's decisions, including what was observed by Morrill Hall employees and what was captured on building and campus security cameras. Actions like what we saw from protesters on Monday are not acceptable. Those actions endanger our safety, emotional and physical safety, erode the fabric of our university community, and undermine the legitimacy of important causes that our students, faculty, and staff care so deeply about. And I just really want to go back to that point. These sorts of actions erode the fabric and undermine the legitimate, important concerns that students and faculty and staff care deeply about. I want to extend my offerings that I know beyond the people that were impacted in the building, that these events were distressing and disruptive to many people in the university community. It was unfortunate that went on to have impacts the following day, including the rescheduling of an important event on campus that many schools and faculty had worked for quite a bit of time towards. In the interest of safety, the following day, during a protest on the mall, some buildings had to be temporarily locked down, given what we had seen the day before, and that was also disruptive to our students. And these are the types of things that are disruptive to our university community and interfere with the operations and everyone trying to do their important work towards our mission. They're particularly, but the events were particularly distressing to those in the building, especially when our people are suddenly directed by people they don't know and can't see to leave their workplace with limited notice to ensure their safety and well-being. And so as a community, I just want to ask both this group and the broader group to consider that the free expression and protest occurs in a manner that doesn't jeopardize our collective sense of safety and well-being. And what's clear to me from Monday is we have more work to do to ensure that these values can coexist. I'll take questions later, but I'm going to move on to provide some other updates less related to this week, but related to the biennial budget request of the state of Minnesota for fiscal years 26 and 27. I'm pleased to say that request was approved by the Board of Regents on October 11th. The proposal to the state reflects not just our immediate needs, but also our shared commitment to the long-term success of the university, and it has a special focus on students, faculty, and staff. The process of crafting our budget proposal started this summer with identifying priorities. We distributed 2 surveys and convened 3 listening sessions to help flesh out survey responses and to add them through very engaged conversations. Faculty, staff, and students from all 5 campuses and a myriad of schools, colleges, and units participated in this important process. We discussed programmatic and operational priorities and how those align with the needs and priorities of the state. We also generated ideas about the best way to tell our story and to help our constituencies better understand the work of the university today and what it could be with additional support. One clear theme from this summer is that we need to invest in our students. Importantly, the funds that were requested will directly impact tuition rates and allow us to invest in our students by enhancing their campus life and academic experiences. These proposed investments and requests to the state include expanding mental health services, providing increased access to basic needs, improving career preparation programs, and upgrading classrooms with modern technology. These initiatives are planned to support student success and retention, ensuring we continue to provide a world-class, exceptional experience in education. Another theme in our request this year is the need for significant investment in our faculty and staff, a resource which I believe and all of you through shared governance have surfaced up that we have underinvested in for years. We all know it's the people that make this university great. This investment and workforce reinvestment focuses on increasing compensation and improving benefits to ensure that we maintain a competitive and outstanding workplace. And we've requested those funds from the state. The state support will allow us to address some of our priorities around the market disparities, pay equity, and retention of talented individuals that make the university a leading public research university. If funded, the biennial operating request will also allow us to inch up our recurring investment to maintain our facilities, another area where we have underinvested in the past. Those operating dollars will be helpful, but will not move the needle enough to adequately address the critical state of our physical infrastructure. We will continue to work through a HEPR and capital process on those. So thank you for your time and attention. And that concludes my president's report. So item 6 is questions for the president. I'm happy to take those.
So that's when you go down to the pre-submitted questions.
I am reminded that we first answer the pre-submitted questions. And I should read these? Okay, let's see. One of the questions was around a commitment to sign a joint request for the Bureau of Mediation Services partner maintenance status of the status quo offered by the GLU-UE, allowing bargaining to continue for RAs, TAs, and grad instructors while jointly seeking resolution to the open questions related to fellows as employees. And so for this question, I want to point out the university has been an active partner in negotiations with the GLU-UE for over a year and have participated in 23 two-day sessions to date. The bargaining team is doing an excellent job, and I have full confidence that they're working hard to bargain in good faith with, I guess we pronounce this glue here, which I find so interesting as an aside. As with all of our union partners, we're trying to come to an agreement. Since this is the first contract with Graduate Assistant Union, both sides are being diligent and thoughtful, and it's imperative that they do so into coming to an agreement. Both the GLU and the university must ensure this agreement is workable for both sides. It's going to have long lasting to people for decades. And, we'll need quickly to finalize the agreement. We're going to need clarity quickly on the fellows issue. Filing with the Bureau of Mediation Services, BMS, is the only way to achieve that clarity. And we're committed to working through that process so that we continue the mediation as soon as possible. Since this is now a legal matter being handled by the BMS and our general counsel's office, I can't comment further on it. I will say both myself and the university values our graduate assistants, and we'll try to stay true to our guiding principles for these negotiations as we continue to bargain in good faith. The second question, pre-submitted question I have is around how the resolution passed in May by the Faculty Senate, which was a resolution on the use of police force against student protesters, informed and influenced decisions that were made with the occupation of Morrill Hall. And so I'll start out by saying to this, this was not a protest. This was a vandalism and disruption of university operations. So our plan and my plan for safely and effectively managing protests this year, as I came to you in my early meetings, said, prioritized emphasizing first education of students when they're violating our policy. If safety was not a concern, for example, at my inauguration, instead of first line police action, we used student life to provide warnings and education as how to get back into compliance. If safety is not a concern, we've had dedicated and determined to not have police interaction. And I can say in the 7+ protests we've had this fall with no police engagement. However, as I said from the outset earlier today, if personal safety and the well-being of community is in jeopardy or the destruction of our property occurs, then we would have our campus police restore safety. When I have tearful, frightened staff calling from their office while glass is breaking around them, that is the time for our campus police to restore safety. We ensured that at UMPD, our campus police were the front line in interacting with our students, not outside agencies, and whenever possible, this remains my goal. The third pre-submitted question I have, and then I'll be happy to take questions from the group, are Regents Farnworth mentioned that the board receives public feedback on peak. And the question was, has that feedback been shared with myself or Vice President Horstman, and how will the new VP FO be provided with that information about peak's challenges? And I'll answer that I am privy to all of the feedback publicly that went into the board. I have access to it and I read every comment. And my new VP of Finance and Operations, Greg Goldman, is being briefed this week on peak. So he certainly will be updated as to those comments. And with that, I will take questions in the order that I can see them here. So Will Jones.
Hi, President Cunningham. I'm Will Jones from CLA. I'm an alternate for Jessica Lopez Lyman. I'm also president of the Twin Cities UMN chapter of the AAUP. When you interviewed for this job, you were asked about your experience with unions, and you responded that as a former union member yourself, you saw unions as quote unquote important partners that end quote leveled the playing field, pushed for equity across a decentralized campus, and raised important issues that could not otherwise be addressed. Yet since you were hired, your administration has continued a pattern that was set under your predecessor, the former CEO of Hormel, of evading negotiations and refusing to address the serious inequities that are faced by graduate workers at the U. And now, after more than a year of negotiations, we are facing a strike that would disrupt classes and cause hardship for all of us, including the grad workers. But instead of reaching an agreement, the administration has challenged a law, defied the law, classifying grad workers as members of the bargaining unit. So my question is, why did the university file this unit clarification petition instead of filing jointly with the union as they expected and was previously agreed? And why won't you withdraw the petition and return to the bargaining table as the union has requested? I'll point out that the state administrative laws allow for a maintenance of status quo to be, quote, in part or in whole. And so the university has the option of continuing with negotiations while the issue of the fellows is being resolved. I'm wondering why that's not being considered and done.
So first, I'll reiterate the comments that I said in my interview, which I believe our unions are a critical part of leveling the playing field and an important part of the organization. And I think I addressed your question already in my first comment. And it is
you
now.
Said that it was
sir, I'm
by
speaking.
the BMS, but
I am
not.
speaking. You cannot talk to me while I'm speaking. I mentioned it in my opening comments. So this has now gone to the Bureau of Mediation Services. And as I said, since it's an open a matter right now and in negotiation, I can't speak further about it. So I appreciate the comment. We are working to resolve it, and I trust the negotiating team is doing well to do that. It's important to resolve the issue of the fellows that is on the table, and we are taking the path to try to resolve that as quickly as possible. We would all like that resolved. Next question, Eric. You're on mute, Eric.
Thank you very much. This also is less a question than a comment on the negotiations, and you can respond, President Cunningham, as you wish. But I have been approached by several Humphrey faculty members, including Humphrey School faculty members, including those who are involved in the administration of our PhD program and leadership that program, just expressing surprise and disappointment in what they understood to be the university's offer around hourly wages for graduate assistants, PhDs. And I promised my colleagues that I would convey this sentiment because I think it's held pretty widely among our faculty.
Well, thank you for that comment. I know compensation is one of many issues that the teams are negotiating around, and we'll look for how that process plays out and working in good faith. I have time for these two questions, and then I'm going to have to move on. So with that, I'm not sure these are coming up in the order that I'm seeing them. Is Nathaniel, were you next in line here?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes, thank you. First, I would move to extend this section of the agenda by 10 minutes.
Second.
Procedurally, staff.
That's
Amber, can you consult here on procedure, or is there a
Amber,
poll?
go ahead.
I was going to ask you, Nancy, is it 2/3 needed to extend the debate?
I'm checking.
I have it in notes from previous meetings as 2/3, but just wanted to double check.
Yeah, that's right.
All right, poll is initiating. A few more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. With 123 ayes and 39 noes, 76% approve that, and this motion does carry.
Hey,
I still have the floor for a question, right? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. President Cunningham, I wanted to ask about a September 24th CLA Assembly resolution calling on you to affirm that you would not intervene in a subsequent hire for the directorship of the Center for Holocaust and Genocide Studies. It seems that the provost did respond to this just minutes before the Senate meeting with a report, though, that restated commitment to compliance with university policy, but did not address the direct question posed in the resolution. After that, on September 24th, on October 7th, the history department, which had been asked to consider a separate faculty hire for Roz Siegel, issued a statement to you and to the provost declaring that it could not move ahead with such a consideration until it had received the assurance of non-interference requested by the CLA Assembly so that history would not be seen as complicit in what the department views as a violation of academic freedom in the previous revocation of his offer. So my question is, do you plan on responding to the report with a direct affirmation of the request made to not interfere in the appointment of a new director for the Center of Holocaust or Genocide Studies?
Yeah, thank you for the question. So I think first of all, I'll reaffirm what has been the sentiment for quite some time, which is however the history department would like to proceed with hiring the faculty or not hiring the faculty is entirely within the realm and decision-making of the faculty of the history department and the chair. And so I appreciate however you choose to proceed or not proceed in that case, and that is entirely up to the faculty for hiring Raz Siegel, and I support either decision. And really don't need to support either decision because it's fully in the realm of the faculty. For the question that was put up to me, the provost answered that question today, which reaffirms my stance and the university stance and her and I commitment for supporting university policies and procedures. I laid out in July in my memo how we would be proceeding in terms of the evaluation of the next steps for that, and we will work on moving those forward in the next month or so here. So thank you for your question. Moving on, I'm sorry, I only see your first initials here. Vivi?
Hi, President Cunningham. I'm Vivi Ganesh-Ananthan. I'm a faculty senator from CLA, and I'd like to yield my time to Katrine Van P.
I'm sorry, I didn't quite hear that.
I am yielding my time to Katrine Van P.
I don't know where that person is, I'm sorry.
I am right here trying to switch on my video. Are you able to see me?
Yes.
Okay. Hi, President Cunningham.
Hello.
Hi. On Tuesday, you sent a system-wide email in which you, with empathy, described the experience of staff in Morro Hall on Monday as terrifying, distressing. You read a version of that statement just earlier as well. Again, referring to the staff as frightened and tearful, etc. Also on Tuesday, Sahan Journal, a local journal, published an article in which they cited several university community members, a student and one of our most distinguished faculty members, who spoke of what they are going through as members of the Minnesota Lebanese Palestinian community. They talked about their feelings of helplessness, loneliness, anguish, pain, anger, and sadness. The article, I believe, very clearly shows the local impact that the issues in Israel and Palestine are having on members of our own community. So my question to you is, are you similarly willing to share a statement in which you express your empathy for the suffering that these members of our community are going through?
So first of all, I'll say, nobody can be watching the news right now and not have empathy and humanity for the terrible loss of life that we're all seeing play out on the news. And we all certainly have empathy for that. I have repeatedly released our teams, the provost, others have repeatedly put out what the resources are for our faculty over and over again. So we certainly want to support our community members, and we have resources available for all of our community members and how they can be supported during these difficult times. Those don't go out to targeted communities. It's specific to, right now there's a lot of people who have a lot of feelings about world events, and we've recognized that, and we've offered resources to faculty, staff, and students how they can manage those during the difficult times. So thank you for your question. Sam?
Yeah, hello, President Cunningham. Sam Rosemark with the U of M Alumni Association. Thanks for taking the question. I was just curious, you've passed your 100-day mark. I'm just curious how things are going as you're getting out across our campuses, across the system. What are some things that you're hearing, and what's some feedback that you're hearing?
Yeah, thanks, Sam. I have to say, despite the difficult, complicated times that we live in on campus and here, that I'm having a fabulous time here. This is a wonderful community to get to know and to get to work with. I've been meeting community both locally. I was in had a chance to tour some of the CLA scholarship in the prior weeks. I was over in the law school yesterday. Have got a chance to meet alumni in DC this past weekend and in UCLA the weekend before that. And, what I hear over and over again are amazing stories of how the University of Minnesota has changed people's lives and allowed them to do just amazing, amazing things going forward. And so, I'm beginning to work on how we are going to lay out the planning process formally around strategic planning, how we improve the way we work together as a system. And I think there's just exciting, great opportunities for how we improve the health of the state. And, I think keeping our eye on our main mission of how we support our students and how we support our faculty so that we can accomplish these great things that the University of Minnesota is capable for really changing the world is really important. So I'm having a great time. I did sign up for all of this, and I'm very pleased to get to work with everyone here on it. So thank you.
Thank you.
Seeing no further questions, I can find my agenda. So seeing no further questions, I will move on to item number 7, which is the Provost report. Provost Croson, the floor is yours.
Thank you, President Cunningham. Good afternoon, everyone. I want to add my thanks to that of President Cunningham to FCC for their willingness to convene on very short notice when what we expected was going to be a peaceful protest, as we've seen all through this fall, escalated into something more serious on Monday afternoon. I had the opportunity to consult with your elected representatives. They gave me input, which I conveyed to our incident response team, and which was eventually kind of integrated into our response. And then I had an opportunity to do a debrief with that group once the incident was over, and to hear their feedback about how we could have done things differently in the future. Thankfully, the other protests this week have so far been perfectly peaceful, and we're optimistic that those will continue throughout the rest of the week. As I mentioned at, I think, our last meeting, we have also scheduled time, a regular time, to visit with the University Senate Campus Safety Committee. This is a committee that was set up in the wake of the Cedric Alexander report after the murder of George Floyd. And this committee has met with me and Student Affairs to talk about our protest response plans. On September 30th, we're planning a visit at every other one of their meetings moving forward, so we can continue to get faculty governance, university governance input into how we're handling these challenging times. In some other news, I have a number of new deans, as many of you know, who've been here for a moment. And one of the observations is that many of these new deans have not visited our other system campuses. And so we had a trip with many of deans, new and pre-existing, up to Duluth this last month, which was a wonderful opportunity for them to not only hear from the leadership team at Duluth, but to meet their counterparts and to have conversations about potential collaborations. We have a trip coming up in the end of November to visit Crookston and Morris, and then we have a trip in early December to go visit the Rochester campus. So I'm very much looking forward to all of those interactions. Some of you may know that we have one dean search open this year. That's the dean of the College of Pharmacy. That search committee has been assembled, and we're going to be having our first search committee meeting relatively shortly. As with all of these searches, we're going to have a very public period where we collect input on the position description, a relatively quiet period where we do confidential first round interviews, and then the plan is to bring some number of finalists to campus in a public way and to get feedback on the finalists, with the hope of having a new individual in place in the fall. I also wanted to spend a moment offering an update on our fall enrollment this year. There was a memo that went to the Board of Regents in October. But I'm delighted to report that in our context of demographic cliff and declining college enrollment in the University of Minnesota system as a whole, our fall enrollment for new freshmen and transfer students was up 7.8%, which is a really excellent outcome. And the other outcome that we're especially proud of is that the diversity of those incoming students is also rising. So system-wide, our students of color now represent for over a third of our incoming class, 33.4%. First-gen students represent over a quarter of our incoming class, 25.8%. And Pell Grant recipients represent almost 30% of our incoming class, 28.8%. In light of the Supreme Court ruling, I'm also delighted to report that we enrolled more Asian, Black, and Hispanic students than we had last year. Now, we also enrolled more students overall than we had last year, but even as a percentage of our incoming class, Asian enrollment was down 0.6%, Black enrollment was up 1%, and Hispanic enrollment was up 1.2%. So I'm very grateful for all of our admissions teams for navigating the Supreme Court rulings, ensuring that we remain in compliance and remaining committed to our core mission of representing citizens of the state of Minnesota in all of their various income levels, identities, and all that. I'll also add a real shout out for our financial aid team that managed to enroll all of these students and offer financial aid packages in light of a significant FAFSA delay. They really, on all of our campuses, those teams worked around the clock, and they did just a stellar job. So I'm very grateful, and I wanted to shout out all of the staff's work in ensuring that we have a phenomenal entering class. So with that, I will stop, and I did not get any questions submitted in advance, but I'm happy to take them. Sarah, I see first.
Hi, Provost Grossen, thank you for taking my question. I'm Sarah Buchanan on the Morris campus, and I'm delighted to hear about the good news about enrollment for the university as a whole. However, as you know, we at Morris have been struggling with our enrollment since approximately 2015, which was the year when the Twin Cities campus decided to increase its undergraduate recruitment from outstate Minnesota by 3,000 students. And I'm wondering, in light of recent discussions about being more having our campuses work more as a team towards enrollment, if there's any talk about reducing the Twin Cities undergraduate size so that there's less competition with Morris and Crookston, Rochester, and Duluth.
Yeah, thank you for that question. That is an important discussion of how large should our campuses be. I wasn't here in 2015, so I can't attest what happened there.
Sure.
I will say that in our current Impact 2025 plan, the Board of Regents set enrollment goals and expectations for all of our campuses, for each of our campuses. None of our campuses are going to meet those goals, including Twin Cities, in part because of the pandemic and the implications that had. But I do think it's a useful question for our next strategic plan that President Cunningham is planning on launching, of how large should our campuses be and what should be the student distribution mix in terms of geographies at the various places.
Right. And I just hope, pardon me.
I will say that, we have data on students who apply and are admitted to different combinations of our campuses. So for example, we know that students who apply to both Twin Cities and Morris and are admitted to Morris but not Twin Cities, we know their likelihood of attending Morris as opposed to attending some other campus. And I think that kind of information is really pivotal as we think about what our strategy should be. I think there's a narrative out there that if a student had not been enrolled in the Twin Cities, they would automatically have gone to Morris, and that's not what we're seeing in the data. President Cunningham has tasked a group of enrollment management experts across the system to think about what we might do to better coordinate our enrollment. And I think that that group will be able to hopefully suggest some strategies that we might consider.
Be great.
I'll use my chair prerogative here to add in one other thing to that, Sarah. So as Provost Croson mentioned, and I didn't get into the details with this group, but we are just beginning to set up. By the end of this year, the board has asked us to have a system-wide enrollment plan for the university as a whole, and we will all be looking at enrollment both across the system and at each campuses in ways that we can optimize, optimize the University of Minnesota as a whole. And also, as we support each of the individual campuses, that's one thing. But there's another committee as well that is beginning to look at how we work as a system. So how we can be, optimally integrated from everything, from all sorts of different ways that the campuses can be supporting each other. I just will add, I'm not sure it's a helpful or necessarily true narrative that I find at different campuses that when one boat rises, the other one doesn't rise, and that that's competitive. I think we have a university system that is working and I see the disbelief there, but I just want to tell you, it's not clear that the numbers and the data bear that out. And what I can tell you is when we rise all together, and we improve our systems and operation, the brand is strong, the University of Minnesota degree is strong. And we can work together to make sure that that helps support the other campus, all of our campuses collectively. But I want to get away from this notion across the system that for any of our campuses, when one has something that goes well, that must mean that somewhere else it is not. We really do rise together, and so I know that was difficult to swallow, and I know there's lots of issues there. But so
Do I have a chance to respond, or is my time up?
I want to make sure we get to other questions, Sarah. So perhaps you could follow up later with the provost or with I. Okay.
Okay. Thanks.
Next question for the provost. Yeah, maybe offline, Sarah, you could take that to the provost office or ask the question for me. For the next question I see up is Terry for the provost.
Yeah, hi, I'm Terry Caraway. I'm a faculty senator from the College of Liberal Arts. My question is about something that President Cunningham referred to in her comments that happened on Monday during the Morrill Hall occupation, that the UMPD handcuffed, detained, and confiscated the belongings of a Daily reporter. The student reporter was wearing a press vest, very clearly marked. The Daily also reports that a Strib reporter was detained. It took 2 days for UMPD to return the student reporter's belongings to him, which included the laptop that he needed for his schoolwork, of all things. And I'm just wondering what sort of disciplinary actions will be taken against the officers who are responsible for these egregious actions.
So as chair, I'll refer you first of all to the
provost.
I'll refer you to the comments that the president made earlier and the statement that was released.
That's not really an answer to my question. I mean, it seems to me that the administration is eager to hold students accountable for their actions. The students have been suspended as of today, by the way, and that the cops are let off the hook. And, I think that this sort of overreaction is a direct result of the military's response that this administration has adopted. My colleagues who were on site during the protest saw at least 20 squad cars, including a SWAT team. There were probably close to 100 officers there. They entered Morrill Hall with their weapons drawn. I mean, this is just, no wonder, it was chaotic.
30 seconds.
There needs to be, accountability, not just for the students, but also for trained law enforcement officers who should know better.
You're muted, President Cunningham.
Yeah, thank you for the comment. So as chair and as president, I'm responsible for the police response on Monday. So a couple items there are reinforced. There were multiple press on the scene. The other press were not detained. There was an unfortunate 5-minute period by which the student reporter was detained until their credentials and to who they were could be identified. UMPD has issued yesterday a note about that, as well as reaffirming their press components. In terms of the force shown, UMPD, I want to emphasize, were the folks that interacted with our students. For safety, any police force will tell you that if they don't know what's going on outside, inside, that they have to have backup, and that backup was on site. It was reserved, it was not used. They only interacted with our university police. So those are some pieces. In terms of how they entered and what happened on the scene, exactly those reports are unclear yet, and yet to have all the information and investigation kind of laid out. So I also, again, would ask you to consider how you would feel in your office if, as you were typing at your computer, glass started shattering around you and the air filled with chemicals, and people with ability to destroy things started shouting outside your office, not knowing exactly what's going on. So we have to restore safety. And I will not let our students, I will not let any of you be intimidated, and I will not let my staff in the building be intimidated. And so with that, we have a police response that restored order at the time. I will also, again, ask you to think about when any individual proceeds with those actions, they must know that the likely consequence of them is criminal, is illegal, that they cross the line into illegal action. And with that, they are likely, the intent at that point is to be arrested. One cannot commit vandalism without knowing that you're going to be arrested. And so with that, the outcome, I think, was as planned. So I'm going to move on to the next comment for the provost. Thank you very much. And this is the last question, I am told, because we're out of time. Vivi? I'm sorry, I don't know your first name. If I knew it, I would appropriately address you.
Sure. I publish as Vivi, and many people at the university call me Sugi.
Thank you. Just want to be respectful.
So I appreciate that. As you know, I'm a faculty senator from CLA. It's great to hear about the even more diverse student body. And it's a pleasure to work at an institution where a number of departments were established as a result of protests. And I have to say that I'm really concerned as a BIPOC faculty member to think about this security-based response. And to, I think one very clear example of this is the fact that public safety has been consulted and social concerns, which I am on, is not. And I want to underscore Professor Caraway's point about the security-based response, which, we're insufficiently addressing these students' freedom of expression and also disrupting the learning activities that are going on campus. And to that end, I want to read a letter from my colleague Eva von Dassau regarding the disruption of normal university operations. Dear President Cunningham, I write to protest the disruption of normal university operations perpetrated by the administration and UMPD in response to the protest Monday evening, repeated yesterday. At about 5 p.m. Monday, I returned to 216 Pillsbury Drive, where my office is located and where I teach a class Monday evening, to find the building surrounded by dozens of Minneapolis police cars, Minnesota State Troopers cars, sheriff's cars, and to find the building locked to key card entry. How, I asked the police, am I and my students to get in to hold class? They didn't know, ineffectually suggesting that I find a UMPD officer. According to the safety alerts, there was no word that any classroom buildings were closed Monday evening, nor should any have been, as Morrill Hall was the only building affected by the protest. Nicholson Hall isn't even connected to any other buildings via the
30
underground.
seconds.
There's no reason whatsoever to block faculty, staff, and students from entering our buildings and to prevent us from doing our work. Fortunately, someone still inside my building let me in, then I let my students in. I'm abridging slightly here for time, but your administration's and UMPD's excessive application of security measures caused this significant disruption to us and to many other members of the campus community. We expect better from those who put themselves in charge of our campus. I look forward to hearing that your administration and UMPD will refrain from abusing the prerogatives of your offices and disrupting the work of the university.
Sorry,
Will you
the
commit
speaker's
to
time
not
is up.
using a
All right,
security
your time is up. I'll allow the provost to answer.
So thank you for sharing that perspective. I'd be delighted to come visit the Social Concerns Committee. Please, I'll talk to the Senate office about it, and I'm happy to talk with them as well as any other committee that wants to discuss or any other Senate governance group that wants to discuss our fall protest strategies. Thanks so much, everybody.
I think we're done with questions there. I'm told we're out of time for questions. I will add my own chair's comment to the last question is there was a lot of disruption to our campus, both Monday and Tuesday. And responses put in place were meant to secure and restore safety to the campus. And so until you have a handle on a safety situation, many people were disrupted. And I would encourage us to view that in terms of how we move back to an area where we have civil discourse that is not disrupting university operations, which impact, as you so aptly pointed out, a lot of people and a lot of students and a lot of faculty that do not deserve to have their day interrupted on Monday or on Tuesday. So with that, I'm going to go on to the next part of our work here, which is item 9 is the SCC report. Professor Goodnow, please go ahead.
Thank you, President Cunningham. As noted in the agenda when it was sent out, this is only a University Senate and not Faculty Senate agenda today. And so I will focus on the SCC component, the Senate Consultative Committee. However, there are a few FCC-esque components to my report today because of the timeliness of those topics. I'll start with an update on the recent Senate Consultative Committee meeting on October 14th, where we've heard from HR about the plans for implementing the new state mandated paid family leave. We also learned about plans for new employee training on sexual misconduct, which you may remember began with President Kaler's initiative to prevent sexual misconduct, PIPSM, which was under President Kaler. The work has now transitioned to a new office created in July 2023 called the Sexual Misconduct Prevention Program. And of course, it has its own acronym, SMPP. One new twist on this next round of professional development will be that it will be made in-house and not by an external group. Finally, we heard an update and had conversation around the implementation of CourseWorks learning, and we heard about what went well, along with how the problems and glitches of the initial rollout are being addressed. On November 7th through 9th, I will attend the Fall 2024 Big Ten Academic Alliance Senate Governance Leadership Conference at the University of Maryland, and I look forward to sharing back with you about that conference in my December report. I next want to address two of the questions from the September Faculty Senate meeting. First, I met with Civil Service Consultative Chair Stacy Maher, who had a question about the report that was made to the Faculty Senate last May by Ned Patterson and Lynn Shu on the Faculty Professional Conduct Work Group. We talked in our conversation about how to make sure that that work not be lost in the multiple presidential transitions that have occurred, and I've initiated a conversation with the president's staff on that topic. I was also asked about the difference between the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee report and the Task Force on Institutional Speech. Given that today's agenda item is focused on hearing about the policy proposed and drafted from the Task Force on Institutional Speech, I thought it appropriate to expand on my answer. As I mentioned at the time, AF&T committee does not have within its charge actually writing policy, which is what the task force was charged by Interim President Ettinger to do. The Presidential Task Force also has broader representation and a broader scope, which includes and goes beyond faculty and shared governance, hopefully ensuring that the policy is set up for successful implementation. AF&T certainly and absolutely does have within their scope to be a very important part of the policy development discussion. Their thorough and nuanced report, which was presented in September, fits well within their charge, and they have continued and will continue to be in conversation with the task force. We chose to bring the task force report to the University Senate for discussion this month because of a strong belief that this policy has the potential to impact all of the constituencies, not just faculty. Further, I want you to consider sharing your views on the proposed policy today, because even if you feel it may not apply to your unit, it is important that statements issued by other units may impact the university broadly. Next, I want to address a topic that is definitely more FCC than SCC, but I feel it important to address it in a timely manner. I will ask for some indulgence from the other university senators, but I do suspect it's not without interest to you as well. As the provost stated in her report to the University Senate on September 26th, and as I reiterated in my report to the Faculty Senate meeting later that day, and as you heard about from both the president and provost earlier today, there are planned consultations with the FCC on protests, which can happen both in semi-real time, as well as pre-scheduled ones for the day before when larger protests are anticipated. On October 3rd, 16 faculty senators sent a letter to the FCC objecting to those additional consultations and accused the FCC of violating the state's open meeting statute. My understanding is that that letter was shared with additional faculty senators, perhaps all, I'm not sure. 2 senators, in addition to the original 16, wrote to express similar concerns. To clarify for everyone, the Senate and its committees are not subject to the Minnesota open meeting law, and this was confirmed by the Office of General Counsel. The FCC is elected by faculty to represent the faculty at large and not individual campuses, institutes, colleges, schools, departments. We serve as the consulting body to the president and other university officers on issues or policies of the university of concern to the faculty. As such, the FCC takes seriously its duty to consult with the administration on behalf of all faculty, and we make a good faith effort to express the wide range of viewpoints on any issue, even and especially when those viewpoints may not match our personal views. We consulted with Provost Croson on October 6th, given the expected activities on October 7th, and there was a reporter from the Minnesota Daily present in addition to approximately 10 FCC members. The provost also called on the FCC for a more real-time consultation as the Monday protest escalated, and 9 FCC members were able to join a meeting with about 15 minutes notice. At that consultation, the FCC members in attendance requested an update be scheduled for later on Monday, and 14 FCC members joined a 7:30 p.m. consultation. There is also a consultation scheduled for November 4th in anticipation of potential protests related to the election. Beyond those technical details, a couple comments on the impact of those consultations. Chief Matt Clark came to the regular meeting of the FCC on October 10th to follow up on some questions that arose during the September 16th and October 6th consultations, particularly around the training of the UMPD and what it means that they are sworn officers. We also made sure at that meeting to communicate that we expected there to be supports in place for community members being impacted by the protests and to communicate awareness of those resources. Also related to communication was a suggestion that for outdoor protests, UMN consider ways to make sure protesters hear the escalated tier warnings. And we shared that the observation that that particular day had the potential for conflict between 2 different groups practicing free expression. The quickly convened October 24th meeting involved a lot of real-time information sharing, and the FCC members recognized the need to ensure the safety of employees and protesters, and that would likely create a need for police involvement. As such, they advocated for the UMPD to be leading the efforts. The follow-up consultation that evening was mostly a debrief and update on what had happened. And we spoke more about communication there. Finally, a note about the resolution sent out by the Senate office earlier this morning that was shared with the chair and vice chair of SCC by the author, and we passed it on to the larger Senate team. Based on the time constraints, the resolution was necessarily placed in new business, where the Senate body will later decide whether to consider the item today or refer it to the Senate Consultative Committee for further consideration. This concludes my SCC and a bit of Faculty Consultative Committee reporting. Thank you, President Cunningham, and I believe you run the questioning. Or, I mean, I can see Will Jones has his hand up. I suppose I say go for it.
Okay, thank you, Chair Goodenow. I'm Will Jones. I'm from CLA, an alternate for Jessica Lopez Lyman. I spoke to co-chair Perry Leo a few weeks ago about why it was wrong for Provost Croson to head a task force on academic freedom and academic center directors after faculty had voted no confidence in Croson over this very issue. Perry Leo agreed with me and promised to discuss this with you. I'm wondering if you discussed it and what the outcome was. President Cunningham has made it clear that she does not take this seriously. Do you take the vote of the Faculty Senate seriously on this issue?
Thank you for your question. Yes, Perry Leo did share that information with me. We have been in interesting times, I will say that. It is on our radar. We plan to discuss it further with the president and provost, but at this moment, we really haven't further discussed it. You asked whether I take the vote seriously, and I think the answer is yes, but we take it in the larger context of the timing of it, the majority of it, and various other things.
Are you suggesting it wasn't a strong enough majority?
I am suggesting it was a majority vote. It was a legitimate vote.
Thank you.
Eric? I think you're muted.
Thanks. I guess I want to respond real quick. This idea that the president's task force is sort of broader representation than AF&T. The language used in the administration's response to our resolution last spring also used this word inclusive task force. To me, I don't understand this. It feels like somehow AF&T is not inclusive. We have 2 librarians, 2 grad students, a postdoc. Last year we had 2 P&A faculty. I think we well represent the university committees and constituencies. So maybe we can just talk about these 2 groups and leave those sort of qualifiers out of it. I don't think they're accurate or useful. So.
Thank you. I appreciate the comment, and I think that is probably accurate. I think I was maybe more thinking in terms of why we brought it to the University Senate, not just the Faculty Senate, and that may have influenced my language choice. So I think that's a fair point. Thank you.
Thank you.
I think President Cunningham, if you're speaking, you're muted or not coming through.
Can you hear me now, Jen? Yes, okay. Sorry, sudden technical difficulties. Okay, moving on. Item 11 is an update from the President's Task Force on Institutional Speech. I will call on Professor Bullman to present this item. Thank you.
Thank you, President Cunningham. So I'm really delighted to speak here today, not in front of the Faculty Senate only, but on the University Senate. I can assure you that in our task force, we've gotten at great lengths to also consider the role of staff and students in this whole topic. And so it's nice actually to be able to report there the whole group. As a result of that, I will also kind of repeat a little bit of the background. I will show you a total of 12 slides. And so for the faculty senators who might just have heard a little bit from the early part, please bear with me. I will be switching over to new information that really focuses on the content of the policy very shortly. So the first summary that is just really especially for the University Senate that I just very quickly want to give is about the charge. The charge of our task force is really to look at institutional statements on matters of public concern at all levels of the university. And if you kind of look at that a little bit historically, actually the provost approached the AF&T committee already in September 2022 on that topic. And as we many of you by now know, in May 2024, AF&T provided a report on academic unit statements. But as it was earlier mentioned too in this meeting today, Interim President Ettinger really expanded the scope of what the task force was supposed to do and really look at broadly about whether and when the university should speak. Also, for those of you who haven't heard about the membership of this task force, there are 8 tenure system faculty on this task force, supplemented by associate university librarian and a graduate student, both of them covered by academic freedom, a full-time staff member, as well as 3 ex officio members. Now, what type of statements is this proposed policy really relevant to? It's really relevant to what I have already highlighted here at the bottom in red, position statements on matters of public concern. So specifically, this policy that we have developed, that we're proposing, is not about operational statements. It's not about day-to-day unit operations, such as, for example, when classes start or when spring break is. It's not about extraordinary circumstances directly impacting operations, such as closing of a building because of an accident or something like that. It's not about external circumstances directly impacting the mission fulfillment, such as a campus closing because there's a snowstorm. And this policy is also not about statements that provide empathy and resources to members of the community. So as we've been putting this policy together, we kind of really thought, what are the underlying principles? And for us, this was mission, academic freedom, climate, and community. So mission, as always for the University of Minnesota, advanced learning, search of the truth, share knowledge, benefit the people. Academic freedom was something that we wanted to really keep as a very high value that really could not be compromised by any aspect of this proposed policy. And it's important for us, and I say that especially again, not only in front of faculty, academic freedom of all university employees who engage in academic work. I've referred in September in the Faculty Senate meeting to a white paper developed by Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee back in 2011 that kind of describes with more detail what is meant with that. Finally, a key aspect that was really important for us as we developed this policy was the climate and the community here at the University of Minnesota at all its campuses. It's really important for us to understand that we are working in environments where often people have really deeply felt differences. And we want to make sure that there is a robust and respectful dialogue between all the parties. So every aspect of the policy that we're proposing really try to take these guiding principles into account. So I'm going to move over to what the policy does with respect to various different kind of groups. And the first one I want to address is really individuals. I want to highlight that nothing in this proposed policy limits the freedom of expression of individuals. And I want to highlight that nothing in this proposed policy limits or infringes on the academic freedom of individuals. Let me move to a second group, and that would be university leaders. And I kind of jump a little bit ahead back here. What do I mean when I refer to university leaders? I'm referring here to the president, to chancellors, to deans, and other senior leaders. And I'm going to take it right away. Unless the matters of public concern have an actual or potential direct impact on the mission and the operation of the university, we are proposing that these leaders may not issue statements expressing positions on matters of public concern. Why do we propose that? We propose that really because of the enormous risks that are involved with statements of this type from the very top of the university. By kind of having an official opinion from the very top of the university, that really inhibits essential open dialogue and debate. It impedes the formation of opinions, and it really chills the expression of those who do not agree with those opinions. And especially when I'm thinking about relationships where there are power relationships, for example, tenure-track faculty who don't have tenure yet, or graduate students who depend on advisors. The speech from top down really is creating pressures not to deviate from such positions. So that's kind of what we have taken into account here. let me move to the second part, which is really statements from members of academic units. And kind of following the lead, really, from the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee, our task force, too, really acknowledges that the mission and disciplinary scope of many units here at the university intersect with matters of public concern. It's clear that many unit members have disciplinary expertise, and that those members may from time to time wish to issue a statement kind of describing a consensus position within their discipline. And we understand that that really has implications on matters of public concern. And especially for certain academic units, such statements may be seen as part of their mission, their outreach, their public service. So we do acknowledge that there is value in some statements, and therefore this policy does allow such statements. However, just as I've outlined it before with the academic leaders, there are risks to statements by members of academic units. And again, I want to acknowledge, as the Academic Freedom and Tenure Report also pointed out, probably one of the biggest risks is coercion of speech. And again, I've mentioned before the example of power differentials. That certainly applies here. And I want to remind everybody, coercion is not allowed at the University of Minnesota. Then there's also a second risk that I want to highlight here, which is the perception of that any statement really represents an official university position. And on particularly sensitive and controversial matters, that can be a problem. So we wanted to make sure that any policy that we're proposing really prevents that perception of a statement from members of a unit being misinterpreted as being a university position. So with these guiding principles in mind, so what does the policy that has been shared with you describe? And this is really kind of a 10,000-foot level outline of the major components of it. First of all, we do absolutely follow what the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee has proposed, which is really that every unit should develop its own policy if it wishes to make unit statements. What we also clearly say in the proposed policy is that statements should intersect with scholarly and disciplinary expertise. What that really means that no, there is no requirement that such statements intersect with scholarly and disciplinary expertise. There will be no way that anybody at the university outside of that unit will really go and explore is the statement now intersecting with scholarly and disciplinary expertise or not. This will not be a reason to take down a statement. Statements must be made on behalf of constituencies. That was a very strong feeling that we have heard over and over again. And so for what we envision is that if this policy gets accepted, there will be no statement from the department XYZ. There may be statements from the faculty, from the tenured faculty, from all the faculty, or maybe statements from the faculty and staff of a particular unit. But it has to be clear who is the constituency. We very much really had here staff and students in mind with this, because we know that it really would feel pretty bad if there are statements made on behalf of the entire unit, implying that students agree with this, that staff agrees with this, but in truth, only faculty have spoken or kind of expressed their opinion on such statements. And next thing, to address one of the former risks I mentioned, statements must include a disclaimer, but we do not require a signature because we do recognize that that could be quite a coercion that could happen if signatures are required. Another kind of final kind of requirement that we're listing here really is that there is a 5-day waiting period after the constituency for such a statement has voted and has been told of the outcome of the vote on a statement. So whether it's been approved in that unit or not. That 5-day waiting period is really there to protect everybody, to give people who feel that the process hasn't been followed the opportunity to raise a concern. And we have chosen this 5-day waiting period in particular because we recognize that once a statement is out of the door, you can't really take it back. And so this is really a preventative way to reduce the harm that might be happening. And we're looking at recent statements that have been done at the university. Usually they come several weeks or even months after actual events. So we do feel that a 5-day waiting period is not such a big a burden really to carry, and it has a lot of benefits. Now, unfortunately, as with any policy, you do have to think about possible violations of a policy. And again, we have really listened very carefully in consultation to concerns that have been raised. In an earlier version of this policy draft, we didn't really clarify enough who could place a complaint. And so the concern was brought up that maybe external actors could really weaponize this policy and could take down a statement. Statement goes up again, then it's coming down again. And so we really wanted to make sure from the task force that there would be no such abuse. Therefore, we propose that this policy really limits the people or the community that can make complaints about this administrative policy to the people who were part of the statement development, the people who voted on the proposed statement, the people who are listed as the statement's represented constituencies. And also to kind of avoid that there would be repeated concerns, repeated complaints that continuously really disable a statement. We've also included that any such complaints must be made within 10 business days after statements represented constituencies were informed of the outcome of the vote. The lower part on this slide is really, well, where do you file a report? And I think that's really pretty much similar as with any other violation of a policy at the university, so I'm not going to spend much time on that. Addressing violations. So if a complaint has been placed, what next? So here I really want to emphasize what the task force really is proposing here is that administrative policy violations, procedural violations, that's really what we're talking about here. Statements cannot be disseminated until resolved, but what could be such a violation? It could be that the disclaimer is missing, that the constituencies are not listed. This is evidently something that can very easily be fixed. And I want to emphasize and highlight really what I mentioned earlier. The complaints are not about the content really of the statement. They're really only procedural violations, and the administrative policy that we're proposing does not really allow any complaints about the content of the statement. I have lower here on my slide in the second half, I have the fact. I would want to remind everybody who's worried about proper procedures. I do want to remind everybody we have at the University of Minnesota a proper system that deals with violations of academic freedom. For that, we have the Senate Judicial Committee. If, for example, somebody were coerced in this whole process, they could approach the Senate Judicial Committee. That process, however, is really outside of this administrative policy. We already have that as an existing process here at the university. And the same thing really applies too. In the extremely unlikely case that a statement would somehow violate federal, state, or local laws, it's quite clear that that statement would have to be removed. But that's not within really the power kind of organized or overseen by this administrative policy. That's just simply general laws that are well outside of the scope of what the task force has been doing. This is my last slide, so I just quickly want to acknowledge the intensive work that the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee has done on this. I think you probably have seen, if you have looked at the report from AF&T, that in many ways, what we are proposing as a policy really follows the general outline that AF&T has given in its report. Obviously, translating general outlines into an actual policy, that takes a lot of additional steps. In order to do those steps, we've listened to numerous community stakeholders. I'm not going to name them, but they are in the report that we provided to you for today. And I really want to thank the task force members who've put in hundreds of hours really to come up with what I think is a very, very thoughtful policy. Finally, I'm going to thank you because I'm going to listen to you. I'm going to listen to your feedback. This is part of the consultation. And so, as with any consultation, it's quite clear, we'll listen. And if there's any further tweaking that's necessary, that tweaking will be done. But I also have to be honest, it's clear that there will be opposing views mentioned, so we won't necessarily be able to follow and do everything that is being mentioned. And with that, I'm giving it back to President Cunningham.
Thank you, Professor Blumen and the task force for the work. Item 12 is a discussion of recommendations from the task force. If you have a question or comment, please raise your hand and send a chat to Amber Bathke noting whether or not your comment is pro, con, or neutral. I will defer to Amber to call on people in the appropriate order. When you are called on, please introduce yourself and indicate which unit you represent. As a reminder, non-senators must be yielded time by a senator in order to speak. Non-senators wishing to speak may either reach out to a senator in advance and ask to be yielded time, or may get in queue and ask for a senator to yield time once recognized. The floor is now open for discussion.
Okay, first we have Christopher Terry.
Sorry, there we go. Can you guys hear me okay? So has legal reviewed this?
I yield time to Christopher Terry. This is Alicia Cohen, CLA Senator.
Has legal reviewed this policy proposal that you're making here?
Sorry, Phil, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, so there is a member from the Office of the General Counsel on this task force. She is a ex officio member, so not a voting member on this. But yes, she has looked at that carefully. So I do believe there should be no problem. But I would be happy to hear any concerns that you may have.
Well, you have several components of compelled speech, and this is a public institution. That's a state action issue. Anybody who violates this policy is going to have a First Amendment claim against the university in a pretty significant way. I would think that that'd be a problem. Have you compared this policy with other public university policies similar to it?
We have looked at actually quite a number of policies, and I have to say there's no clear outcome from, if you look at our university, there's quite a wide range of different approaches. We have seen maybe roughly half of institutions that go to a relatively restricted no public statement approach, and there are other universities that are less strict with that do allow statements, and so there's really a wide range.
But thank you. I want to say we have other people available and asking for questions, and so it's one question and not a back and forth, and so we're going to move on to the next person. I also just want to highlight whatever gets developed here will surely have another review by our general counsel and such. So I appreciate the current input. I'm sure there will be another layer of scrutiny. I don't know how that will interplay as things develop. Amber, will you call on the next person?
Yes, and since Christopher categorized his comment as neutral/con, I'm going to go to a full neutral next, which will be Eric.
Well, I first want to, thank the task force for the work that you've done. Without prejudice to any of the other comments that are being made, because I'm still collecting my own thoughts about this. There's one issue that really stuck out at me. And I would really encourage you to take a very close look at it. And it made me think immediately of the 1971 New York Times case involving Daniel Ellsberg. And that's the issue of, and I realize it's a free speech analog. We're talking here about institutional statements, but I think it's important. And it's the issue of prior restraint. You've got a 5-day waiting period. And in the free speech context, the Supreme Court has indicated that kind of delay only would be justified by the most extraordinary kind of circumstances. And I can absolutely envision situations where a unit would want to say something pretty quickly. And there are lots of alternatives to a 5-day waiting period that don't raise the specter of prior restraint. And I would really encourage the task force to look very closely at that and come up with some sort of alternative to what just sort of sticks out to anyone, I think, who has a focus.
30 seconds.
Speech. That's it.
Thank you, Eric, for that comment. Amber, will you call on the next person queued?
Yes, next we have Aaron Azura.
And is that, do you state whether that was pro or con or neutral?
Con.
Hi, I'm Aaron Azura. I'm the chair of Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies, and I'm alternate from Mike Galope. I just wanted to give a little feedback as somebody whose unit actually made a statement. I think this policy paints faculty statements and unit statements as something that's incredibly risky and dangerous. And I just wanted to say that unit statements are not the risky and dangerous things that they seem to be represented as much as you may have heard about negative feedback about our particular statement. We have received hundreds of messages of support from students, University of Minnesota students, from other faculty and students at other institutions, and members of the public that we spoke out. And I have a question specifically about the policy. So it encourages consensus, right? This policy is encouraging consensus on a unit statement. I appreciate that there's policy about making sure that there's no coercion, that there's, like due process. But in Section 5, the violation policy, statements must be removed if there's any complaint from someone who's part of the unit.
30
and
seconds.
Hypothetical, say one person out of 20 in a department disagrees with a statement and complains, then the statement can't be published. How does that violate department rules of order, which generally function on a majority vote?
Phil, do you want to respond to that?
Yes, I'm happy to respond. If there is 1 out of 20 people who are disagreeing with the content of the statement, that statement can absolutely go up. There is nothing that prevents that statement from going up, unless it is written in the unit's policy. If the unit's policy, for example, says, well, we're going to post statements if there's a 50% majority voting yes, or is a 75% majority voting yes, that's what actually determines whether the statement goes up. Violations of the policy are only like a statement doesn't have the disclaimer on it. The policy doesn't say who is actually represented by this, such as, for example, the faculty member, which when you say 20, I presume you think about faculty members. So one person disagreeing with the content of the statement will not prevent that statement from going up.
I understand that, but one person disagreeing then means that a complaint can be made, and then the statement can't be published, whether or not there's any actual, whether or not the complaint is vindicated or found to be correct. And it just seems to me very questionable that any complaint on procedure means that a statement can't be published.
Aaron, thank you for that comment. And
thank you.
Yep, Amber, we'll move on to the next question.
Next is Kat Hayes.
Again, please note the department and whether it's pro, con, or neutral, so everyone can hear it.
I put in for neutral. My name is Kat Hayes. I'm a faculty senator from CLA. I'm also a former director of the Center for Race, Indigeneity, Gender, and Sexuality Studies and Disability, RIDGES. And as a former director of that program, of that center, one of my concerns and something that I'd like to hear more about is the fact that in this process, there seemed to have been no input whatsoever from any of the units that make up the center. It is formed as a coalition between American Indian Studies, African and African American Studies, Asian American Studies, Chicano and Latino Studies, Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies, and the Critical Disability Studies Initiative. And so the question that I have, and I would like to hear a little bit more from you about, is the question of expertise and the determination of whether something is within the expertise of a unit. I know that you said in your description earlier that this was turned into a should instead of a must, but we have a lot of concerns about that, as the units that often are this is squarely within our expertise, but very often get challenged on that. Could you speak to that a little bit more, please?
Yeah, Phil, do you want to respond?
Sure. First of all, I do want to point out that one of the members of the task force is Emilius White. He's co-chair of the Equity Lens Policy Review Committee, interim director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion in the College of Liberal Arts. And then kind of the second part, really of like how wide we have consulted. I have to say, yes, we are a system of almost 80,000 people, so we have not been able to talk to every group, to every center, but we have reached out quite widely. We have talked, for example, to several department heads who have had statements in their units. Also want to point out that this policy will be looked at further, so it will be looked at again, also from an equity lens, again from another group. So I think I did address your questions.
Thank you so much. Amber, will you call on the next person?
Yes, next is Will Jones.
Again, pro, con, and department, please.
Will Jones, I'm filling in for Jessica Lopez Lyman from CLA. I guess this is a con. I thought we were discussing the policy, not voting on it. But I guess my comment is directed at the section 4D, the relation to mission, saying that position statements must intersect with the scholarly and disciplinary expertise of unit members, and when there is a widely held consensus view within the discipline. This seems like a pretty serious violation of academic freedom. Statements protected by under academic freedom are never bound to comply with a consensus view. And indeed, they often, to stipulate a consensus as a required threshold, violates the very essence of academic freedom. Unit statements may reflect a new analysis or perspective that challenges a consensus view on an issue of public concern. So I think this element of the policy could easily be weaponized against the statement by somebody who disagrees with it. And I think just as importantly, I ask, how is the university going to determine the expertise of a unit or what the consensus viewpoint of a discipline is? That seems to be something, the consensus viewpoint seems to be something that you would need to rely on members of the unit to actually determine. So it seems to raise a huge loophole for taking down the statement, and really an impossible task for the university to determine. And I think
30 seconds.
Academic freedom violation.
Thank you, Will. Phil, do you want to respond?
Absolutely, yes. Will, what you just said, I could have said that. I 100% agree with you. We don't want the university to determine whether a unit has a significant overlap of expertise with that particular topic. And we're really following here what the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee has proposed. What we want is really that the units decide that on themselves. There was actually at some point from Academic Freedom and Tenure kind of the idea of maybe the provost could make that decision. Our task force did not want the provost to decide whether a statement actually overlaps with the expertise of a unit. We believe that decision falls into the hands of the people in the unit, the people who vote on the statement. And arguably, should minority or majority opinion there, I think there's a little bit of misunderstanding from you. Would you support that a minority of faculty members from your department make a statement on behalf of the faculty of your department? That's certainly not, right? So I think that description was the consensus opinion. That was just trying to really make a case that there is a purpose for statements, not the opposite. But I'm happy to bring that back to the task force. We can look at the exact wording so that it can't be misunderstood.
Thank you, Phil. Amber, will you call on the next person? And I understood it was the procedural policy to have it pointed out this point, whether they were pro, con, or neutral from the proceedings. So not meaning to have that be represented in a vote. I understand that was policy of the forum. So that's why, Amber, can you go ahead with who the next person is?
Absolutely. And the next, everyone else that I have in the queue so far is neutral. So Nathaniel Mills is next.
Thank you, Nathaniel Mills, Senator in CLA. One thing I wanted to clarify in response to the last response is that, Section 4D, when it says, the position statement should be on matters of public concern when they intersect with the scholarly and disciplinary expert of unit members, and when there's a widely held consensus viewpoint within the discipline. It doesn't say within the department. It says within the discipline at large. And this would seem to suggest that a statement would have to be something that the discipline of English or gender and women's studies or history as an academic entity as a whole would have to recognize as a consensus. And if that's not the intention there, I would really suggest changing discipline to department or to unit. My other concern is about the Section 5B, addressing alleged policy violations. This states that, when a complaint is determined to be valid, the statement is either not disseminated or removed until that complaint has been adjudicated. And if these complaints are going to be primarily about technicalities on how the statement was issued, I'm not sure why, and presumably they can be resolved quickly, and therefore I'm not sure why the statement needs to be suppressed in the meantime. And my specific question is about who makes the decision to remove a statement if it's been decided that a valid complaint is
30
actually
seconds.
agreed to. The AF&T report suggested that only a resolution of the faculty senate could remove a department statement or a unit statement from a website. And I think that recommendation is in keeping with the fact that if a faculty unit is going to make a statement and then other units are going to take that statement down, it should be faculty who make that decision, because it is kind of a big decision, right? It's a big move to take against a unit. And so I'm just, wanted to point out that I was disappointed that that recommendation didn't make it, into this report.
Bill, do you want to comment on that before we move on?
Sure, yeah. I just want to emphasize that we make a big deal in the task force about the should is not a must. But it's been proposed that maybe we should replace the word should with strongly encourage. The main point really about that aspect is that it should agree, or there should be an intersection between the matter of public concern and the expertise of that particular unit. But this is not an enforceable should, right? So that's just kind of suggesting what unit should think about. And that's exactly what the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee kind of has proposed as well. So we're really using the language of the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee here.
Thank you, Amber. The next person.
Next up is Sam Rosemark.
Yeah, thanks for taking the question. So for me, first I just want to say, I think this is a really important discussion and appreciate the consultation. I think in the times we're in, free speech and how we navigate that is really crucial. And of course, faculty free speech is key to our institution, democracy, and just free thought as a whole across our country. But at the same time, my concern is, if the public is seeing a statement by a department, taking that statement as something the university is then saying, which then may tarnish or could improve their thought of the U, and that could result in them possibly taking action or causing them to change how they're interacting or supporting the university. So, to extend that further, faculty sharing their views on like a Facebook page, via personal email or their own like U of M email, that's a lot different than posting something on a university like web page. So my question, just to get back at the kind of the big picture kind of question here, is how does this policy that's drafted get at that crux of that issue and making sure that we're really, really making it clear where these statements are coming from, but also ensuring that,
30
I wish
seconds.
the public would be more informed and involved and investigative in their thinking, but sometimes they just see something and they say, oh, that's what the university thinks now. Like, I'm not gonna do X, Y, Z now. So I'm just kind of curious what we're getting at from that with this policy. And thanks for the presentation again.
Bill, please go ahead with your response.
I really liked how you introduced your question. I think this is a really complicated matter, right? Just having one individual express their opinion about a certain topic is one thing, then having kind of represent at least a significant group, such as the faculty from a particular unit, that suddenly carries a lot more weight. And I think you implied that in your question. And I think that's why one has to be very thoughtful about that. If you do read the report from the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee, I think they've really done a good job. It's, I think, 35 pages, right? They recognized how heavy that duty is. That's why in their conclusions, they put in a lot of shoulds. Some of the wordings that we've just actually rediscussed, which actually was coming from them. And so I think that's what also represented by really the details of the policy, that, yeah, this shouldn't be a super easy process because it carries that much weight, because the university actually does get letters from groups of legislators, for example, about certain statements that are being done. And so I think it is important to really make clear, well, who makes these statements? But then, yeah, we also see the other side. There is value in some of these statements, and we've really tried to look at that from a big picture. Content of statements could be very, very broad. It could be about, we talked in the medical context. It could be about vaccination. It could be about using of pesticides in an agricultural context, especially for example, if we're thinking about Morris or Crookston. So yes, so we want to be very careful. So from that point of view, everybody involved should spend good time on actually making a statement. And I think that's reflected in how the policy is worded.
Thank you, Amber. Next person, please.
Next up is Samsam.
Hi, I'm a student. Is there anyone that will yield time? Yes.
Amber, can you clarify the procedure? I thought that had to be done a different way.
Nope, this is fine. Anyone who would like to yield time can simply raise their hand or say so.
I'll yield time. This is James Forrester in FWCB.
Okay, thank you. So this is just a feedback. Isn't your presentation doing a type of coercion, i.e. violations of academic freedom, by removing everything to do with academic freedom, by hindering public concerns being addressed at an administrative level? The new policies that have been made coincidentally matches with the pro-Palestine movement and the entities that spoke about it. Moreover, next steps need to be taken to acknowledge public concerns instead of hindering public concerns within administration level. Rather, administration level needs to hear and analyze individual concerns and aligning more on student and staff safety of those who express their concerns instead of silencing students and safety by picking and choosing what administration likes to hear and what administration does not like to hear. Policymaking should focus on creating meaningful changes for a more equitable on-campus and off-campus environment rather than silencing voices where administration picks and chooses based on their own personal views. I see this list of policies as not type of democracy I kind of see it authoritative. For example, the presentation had more on what staff and students should not do in violation of university policies, but the academic freedom or freedoms of free speech had only 1 to no bullet points at all, and I think that's very telling, and I would like to hear your thoughts about this or any potential next steps for improvement of actually hearing student or people who are on campus, their voices.
Well, first of all, Samson, thank you. And I just want to thank the student voice for, providing a comment and a question today and a thoughtful read of the policy. And with that, Phil, do you want to make any comments?
Yeah, I mean, I also want to emphasize I had a 15 limit on my talk here, and one of the reasons why I did not spend a lot of time on free speech and on academic freedom is because I think we should all take that as like a requirement. There's no question about the individual free speech rights that we have. There is no question about the academic freedom of individuals, and so the time that I used for my presentation does certainly not reflect that. And I think that I'm sure the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee would agree with.
Thank you, Phil. Amber, we have time for 1 or 2 more questions. I'm assuming you're tracking the time.
Ned is taking care of that as our clerk. Next up is David Morse.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, go ahead, David.
I was just trying to get the video on. Okay. So first of all, thank you for all your work. I think I generally agree with the policy and think it's well crafted and thoughtful. I think I also agree with the general sense of when it's appropriate for a unit to vote and make a policy that, that it should be when there's broad agreement and it's connected to their scholarly expertise. It's nice to see some specific safeguards as well. One that's in there that I strongly agree with is the idea that the votes must be unanimous. Excuse me, not unanimous, must be anonymous. And then you gave a specific procedure for that. Given that sense of when it's appropriate for a unit to vote and do something like, to make a statement, I generally think it would be inappropriate for a unit to make a statement based on a majority vote, that there should be a broader agreement than that. And I feel strongly enough about that I think the policy should say that the threshold should be some form of supermajority. And I just wanted to recommend that as one tweak. Thank you.
Thank you, David. I think hearing a comment and not so much a question, we can move on to the next person unless, yeah, Phil, you don't need to respond to that necessarily. So we can move on to the next question for time.
And next up is Vivi.
Hi, I'd like to move to extend time on this discussion. It seems like there's a lot left to say, and I wonder if we can extend by 10 minutes.
Second.
Amber, is that a poll? What's the procedure, please?
Yes, we need a minute to consult behind the scenes. The clerk is telling me that we still have until 4:50 to discuss this item. Do we need to vote to extend at this time, or should we wait until?
I may have been incorrect in what I was understanding the time was then. So
okay.
If we have till 4:50, so I don't know what that does with the motion procedurally. We certainly have another 10 minutes, it sounds like.
I'm happy to retract and go. We can go until later and sort it out.
Forgive my newness on procedure, working on it. Yeah.
That's entirely fine. I'm also slightly confused. So I just wanted to, I'm Vivi Ganeshanathan from CLA Department of English Faculty Senator, and just wanted to ask and comment and also ask about the exceptional nature of this move to create a policy around unit statements. There is no other geopolitical or national event that units have commented on in the past that have caused administration to pursue a new policy. There has been a history of statements, the police murder of George Floyd, the inhumane treatment of children on the Mexican border, and the statements that prompted this policy, GWIZ, AIS, CSCL, are all related to pro-Palestinian advocacy. And so I am curious about the timing of the revision of this policy, right? This seems like an attempt to police speech related to that issue rather than a universal policy based on the question of time alone. So I'm curious about that, and also about external pressure. You referred, Professor Billman, to legislators writing. Sam had, and forgive me, Sam, I don't remember your last name. Sam had spoken about members of the public expressing concern. Members of the public are free to express their opinions as we are free to express ours. And I hope that they have good and rigorous educations in the humanities such that they can read us critically and engage. I would love to be involved in that sort of conversation with members of our community. But we are not required to tailor our statements to those. And so I'm curious about if you could talk about that, and also the political pressure that may have played in the move to create this policy. The letter from state legislators last year, which was sent to President Ettinger in February of this year. Thank you.
Thank you, Vivi. Phil, do you want to respond?
Sure, yes. One thing I really need to reemphasize, I did mention that briefly in my presentation, is the provost approached AF&T in 2022. So kind of the perception probably that this this proposed policy and the task force, that is all a result of what happened over the last 1 year. That is just simply not true. But actually, if it would be okay with President Cunningham, I would like to ask Mark B., who was a former FCC chair, who actually has better insight into that history, that he could maybe quickly explain that.
So Phil, I missed the name. I'm so sorry. So I can call on that person. I just need their name again.
Mark B.
Oh, thank you. I didn't hear Mark B's name. Is Mark B on the call?
I'm here, President Cunningham.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Do you want to comment on that? Thank you very much.
Happy to. Yeah, I appreciate the question. And, this is an issue that I should fully introduce myself. Mark B. I'm a member of the task force. I'm also the past chair of the Faculty Consultative Committee, which was involved in discussions around this task force. And I appreciate the question about the timing. And, I think there is maybe a perception that this task force and so forth is explicitly in response to, maybe specifically to a letter from 26 legislators sent to former interim President Ettinger. I just want to reiterate that there have been discussions about this going back to September of 2022. And I'll keep my remarks brief, but if you look at sort of the minutes from meetings of the FCC at that time, AF&T, and the Senate Committee for Faculty Affairs, this is the fall semester of 2022, there was discussion around creating a policy on at the time unit statements and maybe more broadly institutional speech. I think for a variety of reasons, the issue it was on a burner, but not the front burner of either, I think, the provost or, for example, the Senate Committee on Academic Freedom and Tenure. And I think there's no doubt that the events of October 7th and some letters from legislators may have brought it back to the front burner. I don't sort of know all of the details of all of that, but you can go back and look at various Senate committee minutes to see that this issue has been around for a little bit longer than, more than a year preceding October 7th. And so I'll rest there.
Thank you, Mark, and thanks for the question. I think that provided some clarifying input. Amber, and I want to get a procedural correction. I was told we have time until 4:40, not till 4:50, and we can decide at that point if somebody wants a motion differently, but we nonetheless, in the meantime, we can keep going with questions. Amber, can you call the next person?
Next up, we have Bruce Braun.
Hi, I'm Bruce Braun from the College of Liberal Arts. I have a question that goes further along this line of questioning about the sort of the process by which complaints are dealt with, and it's really a question of where and by whom. So my understanding from reading the policy, and this is a big document, so I'm sure a lot of us are still wading through it, is that any decision by the Senate Judicial Committee is subject to approval by the president of the university. And I guess I have a few questions about that. The first is, what happens if the SJC does not uphold a complaint? Can the president overrule that? And one of the reasons why I think that's worth thinking about is that as one of the previous speakers noted, the president's office is inundated by political influence. It's unavoidable. That's just the nature of that office. So having the president approving or upholding or not upholding an SJC finding seems to be a problematic route to go. And I'm going to come back to what the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee recommended in their report, because I thought it was wise. And that was that these kind of decisions should be made through a resolution of the Faculty Senate. And I'm just wondering, if we're wanting to take this out of the realm of outside political influence, are we setting this up correctly?
50 seconds.
In terms of how we're thinking about the way complaints are dealt with? Thanks.
Bill, do you want to comment on that?
Sure. First, I do want to kind of make one correction here. What happens with the Senate in the Senate Judicial Committee, that is really totally outside of the scope of this administrative policy. So your concern that you raised there in regard to procedures relevant to the Senate Judicial Committee, that's another policy. And so I would have to refer you there really to the chair of the Senate Judicial Committee. And I'd be happy to follow up with that. I do want to emphasize that a former chair of the Senate Judicial Committee is actually a member of the task force. So I'd be happy to share with that, but that is really a concern that's not about something that's in this proposed policy. But then
Thank you. So thank you for that. I think we'll move on to our next question.
Next up is Christopher Phelan.
I yield time. This is
Thank
Alicia Cohen, CLA Senator. I'll yield time.
Thank you, Alicia. My question's short. Did the committee consider simply adopting the University of Chicago's Calvin report? It's 2 pages and seems to have worked pretty well for the last 50 years.
Bill, do you want to comment?
Sure. Yes, we looked at various different documents. Really, in the summer, we looked at a broad range of different documents. And I have to say, if we had used the approach that you're referring to, that would have been very different from what the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee actually came up with. And so we felt that there were good arguments made by the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee. We also noticed that as we were going through kind of the details of this, that there are some weaknesses in existing policy at the university. One typical one would be, actually everybody talks about academic units, but doesn't really define what academic units are. So as we were kind of really going through that, we felt that actually some more explicit guidance would be necessary. So that would be one of the reasons why we came up with something that looks different from what we've seen in other places. I think with the overall kind of thrust, the overall guiding principles that we have applied in the task force, we are quite midstream when we compare ourselves to other places, but I do have the impression that we thought more thoughtfully about individual situations.
Bill, Amber, next question.
I do not see any more hands in the queue.
Okay.
I just saw Vivi pop up.
Hi, I just had a follow-up to my earlier question regarding the timing. I'm just wondering if this came up in 2023 before October 7th, if it's possible for someone to point me to the minutes of that discussion. I'd really love to see. Thank you.
I guess that's not really a question for Phil, or maybe it is a question that Phil and the task force can respond to. Otherwise, perhaps the Senate staff can support that. So is that something that Phil and the staff can take back to find that? Amber's noting in the chat she can do that, but it will take a moment. So I guess stay tuned in the chat for that and or for a follow-up. Okay. I'm seeing more hands. We do have 5 more minutes for questions. Amber, do you want to call on somebody else?
Sure. Next up is Eric Van Wyk.
Hi, I'm Eric Van Wyk. I'm the chair of AF&T. Just as a clarification, I could answer that question about what happened in AF&T in 2023 if Phil wanted me to address that or not.
If you want to clarify that the policy came up in the meantime, there probably are also minutes that Amber is pulling up, but if you have a brief response for that, Eric, go ahead.
Yeah, I can say that we talked about it in 2022 a couple times, not in 2023 until the December meeting of 2023. It was mentioned in the minutes only in September of 2023 as a topic that the provost was still interested in, but there was no discussion at all before December in 2023. So
if I heard a 2022 date.
In no discussion in 2023 before December. We did talk about it in September and November of 2022. But then it, as Mark suggested or said, it went to the back burner. And October 7th, I think, is what brought it to the front burner. So.
Right. So for my own clarification, it sounds like this topic was first discussed in 2022. So that's and somebody can find perhaps the minutes to get that clarified and get that sent over to Vivi for your question. Amber, next question.
Next up, I see Sam again.
So recently there was a guy on campus who said racial slurs and Islamophobia too. And he kept saying the word terrorist over and over again. And a lot of people saw that video. And there wasn't a proper statement that was released, I believe. And also I wanted to address, or I want the administration to address the rising racism and Islamophobia on campus. How would this be addressed by the university? Apart from words that doesn't really mean anything, what actions or what proper actions will be taken to address this?
So 2 things. I mean, one, a procedural point. I believe somebody needed to yield time. However, understanding that we're all learning. I hear your comment. I believe this conversation though is around the topic at hand here for the policy. And I don't hear a question related to that policy. If there's a specific question there related to that policy, we could take note of it. Otherwise, I'm going to move on to the next person. Samson, did I assuming somebody would have yielded to your time, was there a specific question you had related to this policy? Hearing, well, yeah.
So the policy that was mentioned talked a lot about like what students and staff can't do and what's like the complaints that are being made to the like certain academic unit members. I believe that was like on the first slide. But I don't think the whole presentation doesn't mention anything about like rising racism, like how will administration or how will policies help with rising racism or Islamophobia on campus. There was no presentation or any point that was made on the slide about that.
So I'll take that as a point of note, Samson. Thank you for your comment on that. And Amber, is there a next question?
Next up is Aaron Izura.
Hi again. I just wanted to get some clarification on the bodies that take complaints. There's a couple of different types of complaints, right? There's procedural complaints, and the policy doesn't give a real sense of what office actually deals with those complaints or how they're adjudicated or decided. And then for violations of academic freedom, to take it to the Senate Judicial Committee, which meets, doesn't meet often. And as others have said, this means that it would hold up publishing a statement for weeks, if not more. Is there any reason why complaints can't go to AF&T rather than the Senate Judicial Committee? And particularly because then if it goes to the Senate Judicial Committee, then the president, has, I would say, a kind of thumb on the scales in terms of deciding that. And, I appreciate President Cunningham that you need to make these decisions. But so two questions. One about the procedural violations, and then secondly, about the academic freedom violations. Thank you.
So 2 points before I hand it to Phil. First, I'm still learning about the Senate Judiciary Committee, so look forward to that briefing. Two, Phil, if you want to take that question, but I also want to note I am going to have to leave at this point, and so unless if there's other questions beyond this, I will need to turn that over to Perry Leo to finish those up. So, Phil, do you have a response to this?
Yes. So
sorry, excuse me. And then Perry will chair the rest of the meeting with my apologies for my need to be somewhere else. So go ahead, Phil.
So at first, academic freedom, again, I want to re-emphasize that this is independent of this proposed policy, right? We here at the University of Minnesota, we do have the right to complain when there are academic freedom violations, but that's really outside of the scope of this policy. And so what I have referred to there in my presentation too is simply existing policy when somebody's academic freedom has been violated. And if anybody is unhappy about that particular policy, I think then that just should be brought up in the general revision of policies, that you could bring that to AF&T. AF&T could kind of start to look at policies again if they have a reason to do that, but that's not really related to this particular policy. What's related to this particular policy is really essentially just procedural violations, because again, I emphasized that earlier, the content of a statement is really not in question. Nobody asks anybody to look at the context. And I think that was really originally, many thought lines ago, kind of the thought of academic freedom and tenure, when they thought that maybe somebody should look at whether a statement is related to the disciplinary expertise of a unit. If somebody would have to look at that, then the Senate would be the best place to go with that. And I personally agree with that. But we took that out of the game from the task force. We don't want administration to make decisions on what is the expertise of Department XYZ. We really want to, like, if it's a statement from your department, we want to leave that in the hands of your department and not bring that to somebody else to decide. And that's why the task force believed there is no need to invoke the Senate in that case, because it is really just the only complaints that one can make it according to this proposed policy. They're really just procedural. It's like, if somebody from your department made a statement and nobody ever asked you, you would probably not feel happy about that. There needs to be a way to actually speak up in a case like that. So does that clarify?
Yeah,
I want to say, first of all, thank you, Phil. I need to leave. I really want to just note my thanks for both your committee's report today, as well as for the very thoughtful, respectful conversation of this group. And with that, thank you very much to Perry for taking over the rest of this meeting. Have a good day, everyone.
Thanks, President Cunningham. We're at time, so I was planning on taking one more question. I saw Eric's hand then go up, so let's take one more question and then we can see if Eric has something brief to add.
Next up,
So
we
that would
have-
be, go ahead, Amber, sorry.
That's okay. Next up, we have Seema Shaksari. If you're not a senator, please ask someone to yield time.
Thank you, Amber. I'm Seema Shaksari, Associate Professor at GWIS. Can a senator yield me time, please?
Yeah, I do.
Thank you, Tony. I want to ask, it's too bad that the president had to leave in the middle of this important conversation. I would like to ask, as someone who is a part of the Gender, Women, and Sexuality Studies, and our department faculty have the expertise in the issues around carceral state, settler colonialism, and racism, to think about the question about issuing a statement and how cumbersome the policy is going to make that, for example, in an emergency, such as the arrest and suspension and eviction. As you guys were having this meeting, our students were evicted from their student housing. If our statement, if in a case like this, a department wants to make a statement to condemn the administration that is subjecting our students to this form of violence, is this form of policy or the policy that is going to make statements a lot longer, it's going to take a lot longer to issue a statement. What does that mean in terms of our academic freedom and also the safety of our students when they need the support from faculty and units? Thank you.
Thank you. Phil, would you like to respond?
Sure, yes. I see your concern. And I want to emphasize that also the Academic Freedom and Tenure Committee struggled over exactly the same issue, is my understanding. Eric can confirm or deny, or disagree with that at the, later, as he has raised his hand. I think what has been kind of brought up by earlier people who commented today, it's also very clear that if a statement does not come up from an individual or from simply a group of people who wish to make a statement and sign it, which that's always a possibility. That can happen very quickly. But I think the Academic Freedom Tenure look at this issue very carefully, and they felt like, well, if a whole unit or faculty from a whole unit really want to make a statement or something like that, it carries a lot of weight. And there's just an additional kind of a burden of having that weight that comes along. And I think the idea actually of voting, of having a policy, Academic Freedom and Tenure Committees thought about that too, and they did come up with a similar kind of conclusion. So I do think we just have to really respect the fact that yes, when a whole faculty from a whole unit make a statement, that does carry a lot of weight. It is seen also by the students, for example. Kind of what I mentioned earlier on, if a statement really comes, then it should come with a guarantee that there has been no coercion there. That's very different from an individual statement. Any of us as individuals, we can speak up. That's what I emphasized in the beginning with academic freedom and tenure.
Sorry about that. Let's see, we're out of time now. So Eric, are you going to be?
Time?
We could extend time. I'd like to just, there's two hands up. I'd entertain a motion to extend time by 5 minutes.
I have moved to extend time by 5 minutes. This is Vivi Ganeshananthan.
Yep, second.
Sarah Buchanan.
All right. So this requires, I think, a 2/3 vote.
A few more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. With 87 ayes, 47 nays, it looks like that does meet the threshold with 65%. Well, I guess no, 2/3, 66 point.
66 would
Oh,
be
yeah.
2/3,
Oh,
Amber.
that does not quite make it.
Yep. All right. Well, I apologize to people named Eric for not getting their question in. So there is going to be more discussion of this at the December Faculty Senate meeting. So and there will be a vote at that meeting as well. All right. So the next item concerns AI, and I will call on Professor Goodenow to introduce the topic, and we'll have some time for discussion after that.
Thank you, Professor Leo. I suspect all of us here have heard of AI, and likely most of us have already had an intersection with it in our work at the university, and some here may even use it daily. AI has and will impact all aspects of our mission. There is certainly a nationwide conversation about using or not using AI, and not just in higher education. Depending on who you talk to, this is the next best thing, or old news, or the downfall of humanity, and everything in between. If you follow the Chronicle of Higher Education, there are almost daily articles, as well as frequent webinars and in-depth reports. More locally, we know that there's a lot of important work happening in teaching, research, and outreach spaces. Senate committee chairs had started asking about having a coordinated conversation around AI, and at the university, involving multiple shared governance groups and other units. As you can see from the attached link, the Board of Regents is also interested in what the university is doing in AI spaces. I considered asking ChatGPT what UMN was doing in the AI space, but being a bit of a troglodyte, I thought maybe it better to actually ask real people, and so we put it on the agenda. We're going to ask the provost to share a bit of information in a second, but I wanted to sort of tee up what we're hoping for maybe in the discussion part of this. We want to cast a net to try and find out about some of the AI-esque things that we may not know are happening, some good work that you want to highlight, concerns about what we're doing. What do you see as the challenges and opportunities in the AI world, both here and at beyond UMN? What do you see as the gaps in our efforts or policies? Should we convene a task force to engage in a broader conversation about AI across our campuses? If we do, who should be involved in that task force, either as a member or as a person or group to consult with? So Provost Croson, I'm hoping you can tell us a little bit about the board meeting and some of your ideas or thoughts around whether we should form a task force before we have discussion.
Super. Thank you, Professor Goodenow, and thank you everybody for having me back. I know we're running behind, so I'm going to be much more abbreviated than I was planning on being, but I will refer you all to the video of the presentation with the Board of Regents. So if you watch that video, what you will see is that we discussed the use of AI in 3 different domains here at the U. We talked about our policies around the use of AI in the classroom, mostly by students, but also by faculty or other, other actors. We talked about our use of AI in our own operations. So what we should be using AI for, what maybe we shouldn't. And then we talked about the use of AI in research, both to advance underlying research, but also the research that we do explicitly about artificial intelligence itself. The presentation also talks about the ethical questions involving AI, many of which were suggested to me by a discussion right beforehand with the Academy of Distinguished Teachers, which was very helpful in my thinking. But it also talks about the reality, the reality that the the world is changing and that our students are going to need to understand how AI can be used responsibly. So I ended that conversation with the board with what Jen noted that we had been asked by university governance to consider. And I suggested that we might think about a task force that could include maybe 3 subgroups, one around use of AI in the classroom, one around use of AI in our operations, one around use of AI in research. And so I wanted to take the opportunity to talk with this group as a whole. Is that a path that you would support? Would you propose a different structure or a different process? And are there, consider if I'm going to charge a task force like that, are there things that I should consider in proceeding? So with that, I'll stop, and we have at least 7 minutes, hopefully maybe a little more, for comments and input. And I'll let Perry call on questioners.
Hi, Alicia.
Hi, I'm Alicia Cohen, and I'm the director of the journalism school and a CLA senator. I think it's a great idea to have a task force on this issue. I think we need to advance our AI work and go full speed ahead together. And I'm also commenting right now because I'm going to step out of the meeting shortly to an evening event, and there's more on the agenda pertaining to student journalists. And there's a non-faculty senator, Christopher Terry from the journalism school, in the room who can answer questions if I'm not here. So I apologize for that.
Thank you, Alicia.
Vivi.
Hi, thank you. Sugi Ganeshananthan, CLA English. I hope that whatever the university does going forward regarding AI takes into account and supports its employees, some of whom have had their IP taken without consent for the development and training of AI. That definitely includes my work. I'm primarily a novelist. I'm aware of at least one active lawsuit about this. And I also just think, kind of in the spirit of what we do, that this has been developed in the sketchiest of ways. And I just want to express my extreme reservations about that, at the same time that I acknowledge the ways that, as a person with a motor disability, I use things that are driven by AI all the time. I feel no small amount of conflict about that. And also, I don't want my work to be stolen. AI cannot read, and therefore what it is doing for its development, what those companies are doing for its development, has in fact been theft. So I just wanted to put that on the record. Thank you.
Yeah, no, thank you for that comment. And I fully agree. One of the risks or ethical issues that I highlighted for the Board of Regents that you can see in the video is that anything that's uploaded to AI becomes part of the training corpus, even if that uploader did not have the rights to upload that material. And that's deeply problematic for all kinds of reasons.
All right, I will call on Sarah. Alicia, I assume your hand is still up from the last question.
Hi, thank you. Again, this is Sarah Buchanan from the Morris campus. I hope that in the discussions of AI as they unfold, take into consideration tools such as automatic translators, and how, of course, they're wonderful tools. We all use them, but as a French professor, what's really troubling is that we have an increasing number of students, I would think almost all of them, in fact, who write their papers in English, put them through a translator, and turn in the results as their papers. So I don't know what can be done about that, but I just wanted to get it on your radars so that it could be part of the discussion. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's a great comment. And indeed, the presentation talked a little bit about what our policy currently says, which is that each instructor needs to indicate which tools are allowed and what kinds of assignments in their course. And then, of course, when students violate that guidance, then they are, guilty of academic dishonesty and can go through the student conduct code process. But I think, one of the things this task force could talk about is, do we want a different policy, right, that would deal with those kinds of concerns?
All right, thank you. Ronald Green.
Yeah, thank you. I'm with CLA. I guess you may have just answered what was my point, which was that I know that system-wide academic integrity committee has been working on this already, and for better or worse. And it just seems to me that, we need to, I support the idea of a task force, but let's just make sure that we talk to all the other groups that might already be talking about this, so that our task force doesn't just reproduce the wheel that other units or other governing organizations are doing things with. Yeah, that's all.
No, 100%, great idea. And I'd love, I mean, I'll kind of, when I close, but I can say this now, I would love nominations from people about who might serve on a task force. If we have 3 that are interconnected, people with expertise who have been already thinking about it. Part of this is if we're going to go this direction, getting started on a membership list.
Yep. And Deirdre, I'm going to call on you in a second, but first I'm going to call on Professor Goodnow to make a motion to extend the meeting for a few minutes.
Yes, I would like to make a motion to extend the meeting for 15 minutes till 5:15.
Second.
Bird, do we need to vote on this?
Yes, I've got it in my list, but I gotta find it. Sorry about that. A few more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. With 73 ayes and 43 nays, that is 63%. That motion does not carry.
Okay, so I am not a parliamentarian, so my understanding from Nancy Sims is that at this point we end the meeting. Do we need to abstain or not abstain? What's the word I'm looking for?
The motion
Do we
to
need to
vote.
adjourn?
Adjourn.
Or do we just kind of stop?
Motion to adjourn.
It would typically be a motion to adjourn. We're not through all the business that was on the agenda, so it is a matter of discretion to the chair to make final calls on any particular proceeding. But
Okay.
typically,
Well, I think what I'd like to do is, we know there's a new business motion, so what I'd like to do is end the discussion on AI, and hopefully we can have that discussion again. And then just get to the new business motion and have at least a few minute conversation about that, because I think it's important, was done in advance. So first old business, there is no old business for the Senate. So the next item, last item, concerns new business. Is there any new business? So Chase, I know you have new business, so if you could briefly, please, give the body a brief summary of your new business and what it's asking the body to do, and then we'll have a vote as to whether to take it up immediately and go from there.
Yes, so this resolution is censuring UMPD for the improper detainment of a Minnesota Daily journalist. It essentially censures the UMPD. It requests a report for them to conduct a review, and then a report to report back to the University Senate. Thank you.
Thank you. Has this resolution been shared with the body?
Yes,
Yes,
so
it's
shared
been
by email, and it is
Okay.
linked in the agenda as
Great.
well.
Thank you. So before we have any discussion on this, we have to have a vote, or we have to have a motion for immediate consideration. So is there a motion for immediate consideration? And then this has to pass by a 2/3 vote as well.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Yes.
Second.
All right, Amber, could you put out a poll, please? Thank you.
A few more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. There being 69 ayes, 44 nays, that is 61% in favor, and that motion does not carry.
All right, so that motion does not carry. So this censure resolution will be referred to committee for further consideration. So that goes through that completes the agenda. So do I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Yes.
Second. All right, Amber, can you prepare that poll? Thank you.
Few more seconds if you wish to vote. And last call. '89 ayes and 19 nays, that motion carries.
All right, well, thank you, everybody. I'm sorry we didn't have the time to get to everything that people wanted, but we will keep this on the radar for the next Senate meeting. So have a great night and happy homecoming.